Hello everyone, today we're going to be bringing you some new rules, fresh hot off the press about the upcoming changes going to be made to the Singapore's HDB market, to the BTO markets, some of the measures put in place. I guess you can call this some kind of cooling measures, pseudo cooling measures. They only really work for the HDB and resale market to kind of curb the prices in place. So we will go through what these new measures are and how they are going to affect the HDB market and the resale market moving forward. So, point to note, first of all, that I'm not a financial advisor. All of this is just my own personal take from being in the real estate industry. I'm just going to be sharing what are the kind of impacts we should consider and how all these will affect our strategy moving forward when it comes to selecting a property. Alright, so here it is on CNA, the news article, bright and big. You can go over there and just have a look. There are going to be a few measures set in place. First of all, the one that is most important, there will be a 10-year MOP period for prime location BTO flats. So, what are these prime location BTO units? These are all locations such as really popular areas such as Great Southern Waterfront and Rochor area. All the places that are generally deemed to be a bit more central, a bit more premium. Our traditional MOP period has always been 5 years, right? Has always been 5 years. But these new areas, these new prime areas, the BTO units, you are expected to stay in there for 10 years. So that means, what does that mean? When you start selling a house, it's going to be at least a 10-year-old house. It's not going to be a 5-year-old. Remaining lease is not going to be 94 years. It's going to be 89 years. Now, add to that, you have a waiting period to apply for your flats. As you're balloting for a flat, as you're waiting for it, you need to wait for it to finish building. You're expected to wait maybe 3-4 years. So that means if you are buying a house now, if you're buying one of these prime location BTO areas, you are going to exit, or the only time you can start selling is about 13 to 14 years later. Very important to take note, because for younger couples, especially let's say you are early 20s, you are maybe mid 20s, or even let's say early 30s, add 13 years to the age that you applied for, that is going to be the earliest time that you can start selling your place. Now, what usually happens is something that people don't really consider is, especially if you are a younger couple, right? If you are a younger couple starting your first job, always take into account the fact that over the next few years, your salary will be increasing, your income will be increasing, your earning capacity will be catching up. And if you are locking yourself into a house that is, let's say, 300-400k in value over the next 13 years, you have to understand, even if the house does make, let's say, $150,000-$200,000, really good amount, right? What we can reasonably expect. 50% over the next maybe 15 years. Sounds good, but in actual fact, don't forget that this number is, you only made about 200k over the next 15 years. Sure, you have a lower down payment, but the rest of the money is actually in your CPF, just sitting around, not actually doing much. If this actually went into another property that was doing much better, you will have a much greater income, you will have much greater capital growth, rather than just having it sitting around in the CPF. So, how does this affect? I still do believe that BTO flats have their value out there in the market. The BTOs are good. You want to get in a cheap unit, you want to get in a cheap housing. There's nothing better than a BTO, because it really is the cheapest out there, other than perhaps renting or a very old flat that you're going to be prorated on your loan for, so that might not even be that good for you. You might need a ton of capital outlay. But do take note that if you are looking to really maximize your profit, you are really looking to see how you can leverage on your income, leverage on your property to make to start building some wealth, to start accruing some capital appreciation, then do understand that there are some limitations in the BTO aspect, especially for one of these newer houses that are going to require you to have a 10-year MOP period. So 10-year MOP period, that is the very first kind of cooling measure introduced. That is the very first kind of restriction introduced for these new prime locations BTOs. The idea behind it is very simple. So the government not only wants to keep the units affordable, wants to keep the public housing market affordable, which I think is great because it's a very straightforward, it's a very simple idea behind making public housing affordable, which is what the late Mr. Lee Kuan Yew wanted. He wanted every Singapore household to own a flat, every Singapore citizen to own a flat, to be homeowners. So to keep that dream real and to keep it real, they have to keep flats affordable, right? So, of course, doing that is the first step, making a 10-year MOP period to make sure that there is no like pointless speculation, no buying the lottery ticket, trying to ballot for, Bidadari area, for instance, versus the other like maybe Punggol area, less popular Punggol area. Yep. But as if that's not enough, that's not the only measure that we will be having. We will actually be having more measures coming in. We have the second one, which is a subsidy clawback. So, subsequently, if you were to say you were getting one of the areas, one of these popular areas, one of these highly sought after prime areas for BTO, subsequently when you do sell, you actually do have to pay some of the money back to recover the subsidies. So, for those who are unaware, typically your subsidy you can get almost $100,000 worth of subsidy. You can get 20,000 to 30,000 proximity housing grant if you are staying near your parents or with your parents. You can also get $25,000 enhanced housing grant if you are below income of $9,000 monthly income for your family, and you have the family grant, which gives you a certain amount for a resale flat if you're buying a resale flat. So subsequently, when you do sell under this new scheme, when you do sell your flat, the government will actually take some of the subsidies back. Now, this leads to some cooling off on the price income, because a lot of people actually what they do is they are expecting a certain sale, they're expecting a certain amount of money to come out of their sale, and they factor in the grants. So it's very natural, say you do have like $50,000 worth of grants, and when you subsequently sell, you consider that, oh, you've pocketed this $50,000 from the government. Nothing wrong with that, that's just how it's always been. Subsequently, in all these new places, you might be expected to give a percentage of this $50,000 back to the Singapore government. This will affect the profit margin that you're looking at. This will affect some of the values that you're considering. So keep that in mind as you are considering, as we are working through this upcoming few months, as we are looking at how everything will settle moving forward. So most interestingly, this is not taking into effect so quickly, but in the upcoming November, we actually have a roadshow coming up, new area for BTO. Now, this effect will take into effect for the roadshow BTO units because they are near Jalan Besar, they are quite central, quite popular. But coming back, as we are talking about roadshow, so roadshow coming up, we are going to have a new bunch of BTO coming up in November, and it's going to be one of the prime areas that's considered under this current new public lease, PLH, or priority lease housing, right? So other than the 10-year MOP period, you also have to consider that there will be some subsidy clawbacks. That means moving forward, when you do sell your flat in roadshow, you will be paying back some of the subsidies that you get back to the government, right? Subsidies can be quite substantial. You could get maybe even up to $100,000, right, in subsidies if you max out everything. And you have to pay a portion back, so it could easily be $20,000 for a 20% return, or even up to $50,000, which will eat into your profit margins that you will not see currently, right? Now, taking something maybe I wanted to talk about and to share my thoughts about for all these flats is typically in the current Singapore real estate market, in the current climate, what we see is that when you first start selling a BTO around the MOP period, around the 5-year mark, you'll see some substantial gains. Maybe you bought a house at 300k, you start selling it about 500k, made about 100k or so. Now, for all these newer flats in the PLH model, right, since at the 5-year mark you're still not allowed to sell yet, you will not see any price increase at the 5-year mark. You can perhaps benchmark it to other BTO projects that are coming up in the 5-year mark, maybe hopefully within the same area, within the same geographical area as you, but the gains will not be that much. Where you'll see the biggest spike is the 10-year mark, right? So 10-year mark, when it first hits the resale market, and say in the perspective of a potential buyer, say I'm a buyer now myself, I'm going into the market and I say, hey, I really want to stay near Rochor, I really want to stay near Jalan Besar area. I'm looking around there and I want to buy a BTO, I want to buy a HDB flat, right? What's the best option available to me? Would be something that just MOP. I prefer newer house, and that's where you have the biggest bargaining power. You're able to set the price, and that's where you see the biggest price increase. You could buy like at 400,000 for your BTO flats and subsequently exit about 600,000, 650, right? In that after that 10-year MOP period. Now, what happens after the 10-year mark? Between the 10 to 20-year mark, could the value of your flat still increase? For sure. I think it will be unfair to say that it will not increase any further, and in all likelihood, it probably might increase a little more. But would the magnitude of the increase be as much as the first 10 years? Definitely not, right? Because do consider that within these 10 years, more and more clusters, more and more units are going to hit their MOP period just around you as well, and you will start to lose your bargaining power as the newest or the most recent flat, the cleanest flat, the one with the most lease back in the years left in the area. Alright, so this is just my personal take. I foresee that all these priority lease housing, all these PLH houses will perhaps go up. The price increase will be the highest in the first 10 years, subsequently slowing down for the 20-year period perhaps, maybe even not fully to the 20 years, maybe to the 15-year mark, before the price starts to stagnate a little. Just my personal opinion, of course, but do take note that this is just my opinion. It could be wrong, just my own kind of experience in the real estate industry, right? So, other than these two, what's the third most important thing to come about is that we actually do have something which is the lower quota for the priority scheme. So as it stands right now, anytime there's a new BTO cluster coming up, there's a reserve of 30% of the units that are going to be reserved for people who wants to stay near their family, near their kids, near their parents, right? So we have up to 30% right now, and moving forward, they are going to dynamically adjust this based on the number of applicants, based on the location, and based on other factors. So how much it will be adjusted by will remain to be seen, but hopefully this will make the playing field a little more fair. If your family has been staying in Tampines the whole time, and you want to move on and you want to stay near Hougang, at least this will make it such that if you want to apply for the Bidadari area, it's not as the odds are better in your favor, and you're not just relegated to applying for the Tampines BTO units. So last one we want to kind of go through as well is that for all these future PLH models, there's a very important thing to take note, is that after your MOP period, you are not allowed to rent out your whole flat, right? You can rent out spare rooms, just like currently you can, but you are not able to rent out your whole flat for like $3,000. It's no longer allowed, right? So your BTO model, your BTO units in your less popular areas still can do it without any issues, but your prime areas, owing to the fact that you're going to be commanding higher rental anyway, you're not actually allowed to rent out your whole flat. So this is kind of a preemptive measure by the government to make sure that you're not trying to find a way to circumvent this whole area and make it more, the whole BTO unit more speculative investment wise, right? So all this is not as important. All of this is basically what we have shared, where we've talked about, and also they have gone through that all this information that we shared today can be subjected to changes. They might revise it subsequently, which I think for sure, if any measures are vastly overrated or predicted wrongly, the effects are predicted poorly or poorly received by the government or poorly received by the people, the government will definitely be there to create some make some changes if necessary. So that's everything I have shared today, everything about this information coming in forward. how it affects our market moving forward. I hope this has been helpful. I hope this really does help us to put things into perspective and understand that moving forward, the price to pay for choosing a wrong flat, the price to pay for moving in the wrong direction is actually going to be so much more harsh, right? So be very careful, really understand and weigh all your options moving forward before choosing what flats to go into, right? And always consider the various factors moving into play, right? I hope this has been helpful. See you guys again.